Welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 403 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, I'm going to ask you to agree with me and ask you to hear me out. For the people that didn't listen to my last episode, I told you guys that I was going to be out of town last week, or this week, I guess you can say, which is why you didn't really get any clips from the last episode, which is why you didn't get an episode on Wednesday. I was out of town. I was able to get to see my family, and it felt good to be back home to see my family. And on top of that, obviously, I'm going to start this episode. It's going to feel a little dated. I'm going to start this episode talking about the Super Bowl. Don't worry. I'm going to put the timestamps in the description. So if you don't want to hear me say anything about the Super Bowl, you can just skip to the next topic. But of course, I'm going to start with the Super Bowl. And with the Super Bowl, it's obvious. So nothing that I'm saying is going to be out of pocket, or nothing that I'm saying is going to be out of the realm of being obvious. But when you get to the Super Bowl, obviously that is the last game of the season. And obviously the margin of error is minuscule. And it's minuscule because obviously there's not another game. This is the last game. This is the game for all the marbles. You've gotten to where you need to get to, and this is the game to solidify if you're going to be a Super Bowl champion or not. And what we're learning and what we're seeing is that margin, which is already minuscule, shrinks to almost an atom when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes. There's a reason why people are saying that this is one of the greatest accomplishments that an individual or a team has ever reached. It's not because it's a Super Bowl. You know, obviously everyone wants to win a Super Bowl. And it's not just because, this is Patrick Mahomes' third Super Bowl. This is his third, I believe, Super Bowl MVP. And Patrick Mahomes is considered one of, if not the greatest quarterback of all time. The reason why is because of the season. And we talk about it ad nauseum this entire season. I put clips out about it. I've talked about it last episode when we discussed, just the way that the Chiefs got here. One of the reasons why I was so upset with the Baltimore Ravens, and one of the reasons why I feel like that window that was wide open this year for the Baltimore Ravens may not be open again for a while, even with Lamar Jackson and how great Lamar Jackson is because when you have a player that you're playing with or that you're playing against, or that's in the league that is just leaps and bounds better than everyone else, it's hard. You have to seize opportunities. And this was the opportunity this year, whether we talk about the weakness at the wide receiver position, the weakness at the offensive line. This was the time. And one of the reasons why you're hearing a lot of people say that this was the greatest run is because of all those factors. We talk about the factors to winning games and the factors to winning Super Bowls. The Chiefs didn't have a lot of them. We talk about having that bona fide number one receiver. We talk about having that solidified running game. We talk about having that staunch defense. Now, while the Chiefs had a couple of those marks, they didn't have all of them. And usually what you see in Super Bowl teams, all of them are checked outside of this Kansas City Chiefs team, because you have that X factor. You have that one variable that can never be measured, and that is Patrick Mahomes. We can talk about Travis Kelce, who was great, Hall of Famer, all-timer. We can talk about Andy Reid, who was great, Hall of Famer, all-timer. We can talk about the emergence of an Isaiah Pacheco and how important he is to this team. We can talk about the greatness of Chris Jones and how important he is. We can talk about the greatness of Snead. We can talk about the greatness of Reed. We can talk about the greatness of Rashee Rice, who has emerged as a really good receiver for them. But none of that matters if there is no Patrick Mahomes at the driver's seat. Obviously, yes, because he's a quarterback and you have to get everyone the ball outside of course, Chris Jones and Snead because they're on the defensive side of the ball. But this is Patrick Mahomes is the person that you can never, ever quantify. Because even when, and we've seen it this year, even when he has been down and out, even when it looks like he is at his weakest point, he rises to the occasion. So let's talk about the Super Bowl for a second. And let's talk about how we have, as we sit here today, we are looking at a current NFL dynasty. Now, got a lot of hate, got a lot of pushback for me saying that Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback we've ever seen. That doesn't mean that he is going to eclipse the accomplishments that Tom Brady has eclipsed. I don't think we'll ever see a player, a quarterback, any player exceed or even reach the accomplishments that Tom Brady has reached. I think Tom Brady is forever going to be in a class of his own. But what's interesting about that argument and that conversation is when we talk about now, which I think this is a testament to how great Patrick Mahomes is. When we talk about greatness and we talk about the difference and the margins between Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, the only thing that comes up when we talk about Tom Brady is two things. One, the accomplishments and the championships and how long the dynasty lasted with, of course, Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, as well as going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and winning. And then also we talk about how Tom Brady beat Patrick Mahomes. He is 2 of Patrick Mahomes' 3 playoff losses. Great. Nothing wrong with that. And those are very important pieces to that argument. But when we talk about talent, when we talk about intangibles, yes, I'm not going to be naive in thinking that Patrick Mahomes is as great as Tom Brady when we talk about just sheer accomplishments. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes hasn't done what Tom Brady has done. He hasn't played. He also has not played as long as Tom Brady has played so far, but to each his own. But Patrick Mahomes, to me, is the most talented quarterback I've ever seen. And it's not just arm strength. It's not just accuracy. It's not just running ability. It's everything that it takes to be a quarterback, whether that's timely passes, smart passes, understanding clock management, understanding angles, being able to throw the ball at different angles. There's nothing Patrick Mahomes can't do. Now, I'm not saying, yes, I think Josh Allen probably has a stronger arm than Patrick Mahomes. I know for sure Lamar Jackson runs better than Patrick Mahomes. I know Matthew Stafford might throw the ball at better angles and different angles, but when you're concocting a prototype for a quarterback and when you're building the greatest quarterback, a lot of the things that you're taking and when you mold the greatest quarterback ever, a lot of those intangibles are going to look like Patrick Mahomes. So getting back to the Super Bowl, when you go into a Super Bowl and Patrick Mahomes on the other side, you know and you understand as a team, as a coaching staff, as a player that while, yes, the margin of error is small because it's already the Super Bowl, it gets even smaller because errors and I talk about the margin of error a lot on this podcast, but what does that mean in this sense? It means if you mess up, if you do anything wrong, now obviously people are human, things happen, it is what it is. But I say the margin of error is so small because in those moments, if you give Patrick Mahomes or give someone to the caliber of Patrick Mahomes a better opportunity or a slight advantage, that is the difference that can cost you a game, that can cost you a Super Bowl. So going into the Super Bowl, you already know if you're a 49ers fan, and you already know if you're a 49ers team, if you're a 49ers player, if you're a 49ers coach, you have to maximize on every opportunity. This is probably this is the second game in a row that the Kansas City Chiefs comes in as the lesser team. They were by far the lesser team when we were talking about the Baltimore Ravens, and they were the lesser team when we're talking about the 49ers. The difference is, while yes, the Kansas City Chiefs were the lesser team, they had the best player. And that, while it means something different in terms of basketball and football, it still means something vital when you have the best player for both teams. And that's no offense to anybody on the Baltimore Ravens, and that's no offense to anybody in the 49ers, but that's just truth. When we're doing a players draft of this season, of this not just the season, of the current players, you would be foolish not to pick Patrick Mahomes number 1. In fact, if you're sitting there at number 2 and you have Patrick Mahomes on the board, you would probably say that's the biggest steal in NFL history. This current iteration of Patrick Mahomes. So if you're the 49ers, you understand that there's nothing that you can, I'm not going to say there's nothing that you can do, but you cannot give. It doesn't matter how weak the Chiefs are. You still have that guy wearing number 15. You can't. That margin of error is non-existent. Game plans are important. I talked about that with Baltimore when they played the Chiefs. Game plans are important. And identity is important. While your game plan can change and should change, but depending on the opponent, your identity should never change. Because while game plan is important, identity is what got you to where it got you. Anyone that watched the Super Bowl would probably attest that the first half was fairly boring. And it was boring because both teams were playing to their identities. You know, the Kansas City Chiefs, they were a team all season that was kind of shaky on the offense outside of Patrick Mahomes, and there are times with where his connection with Travis Kelce was strong and Isaiah Pacheco was running the ball. They were sticking to their identity. And the 49ers were doing the same thing. You have the best running back in the league in Christian McCaffrey. You also have the player that won Offensive Player of the Year in Christian McCaffrey. You also have people like Deebo Samuels. You have George Kittle. You have Brandon Ayuk. You have really good offensive pieces, and you have a staunch defense. Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Nick Bosa. You brought on Chase Young, a staunch defense. And both teams were... The reason why the first half for a lot of people were boring, and I will be on that, but I think it was a little boring the first half, is because both teams weren't giving way. Both teams were not budging from their identity, and both teams were, I'm not going to say they were feeling each other out, but that window that is going to open for one team or the other wasn't opening yet. The Chiefs were down 10-7 or 10-0. And for a lot of people, that's being down 10 points is game over in the Super Bowl for some, but it's not for the Chiefs. You just wait for that window. Now, sometimes the window doesn't come, and sometimes it does. And I kind of wanted to bring in the Baltimore Ravens and the AFC Championship because when we talk about identity, one of the biggest reasons why I was so upset with the Baltimore Ravens is because they went against their identity. And in the second half, and I give all the credit to Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, and just the greatness of that that coaching staff, from Spags, from Andy Reid. It seemed like the 49ers abandoned their identity for a second. Not for a second, for a half. A lot of heat, and we talked about this before, but we saw it in broad daylight for the Super Bowl, or in the Super Bowl. A lot of people killed Cam Newton for his game manager versus game changer takes. And some of the people that he put on the list for the game managers compared to the game changers was, got people in an uproar, got the blogs going. We even talked about it here on this podcast. And one person, obviously, that was on that game managers list was Brock Purdy. Now, to be clear, Cam Newton made it a point to say that if you're being a game manager isn't a bad thing. But when you get to places like the Super Bowl and you get to when you're going against an all-timer, you need a game changer. And Brock Purdy is a game manager. And in a very rare sense, Cam Newton didn't say this, but I'll say this. In a very rare sense, they have a player, and the 49ers have a player on their roster that is a game changer that's not a quarterback, and that is Christian McCaffrey. But it seemed like in the second half, they went away from that, and they put the ball in Brock Purdy's hands. And as we sit here now, obviously the season's over. The Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy, these are the passing yards. Brandon Ayuk, 3 receptions for 49 yards. Juwan Jennings, 4 receptions, 42 yards. Deebo Samuels, 3 receptions, 33 yards. Kyle Juszczyk, 2 receptions, 31 yards. George Kittle, 2 receptions, 4 yards. We saw it. We saw the window open. Whether it was Dre Greenlaw tearing his ACL, running onto the field, and I hope for a speedy recovery for him. Whether it was the punt that hit the receiving team and hit the back of the dude's leg, and the Chiefs got the ball with a small field. Those moments cost you mightily. And as we sit here today, the Kansas City Chiefs won their, third Super Bowl in 6 years, I think. I think that the 49ers is a great team. And when you look at roster for roster, it would be hard for me to choose the Kansas City Chiefs over the 49ers 9 times out of 10. It's just when you get to that one player. And there's not a play. There's probably 2 or 3 players in this league that you feel that way for. That they can be going against a team that is far better than them. Because if you look at the roster, the 49ers is far better than the Chiefs, especially this year. But I'd still pick the Chiefs. There's only a few people. There's Lamar Jackson. There is Joe Burrow when healthy. Patrick Mahomes. And maybe Josh Allen. That's it. I think Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. I think Travis Kelce is the greatest tight end that I've ever seen. I think Andy Reid is one of the greatest coaches. I would say top 4 or 5 coaches I've ever seen. And now we're talking about a dynasty, which I don't think people understand how rare dynasties are. Now, we as consumers, as fans of sports, have been greedy and privileged to live through. I've lived through 3 dynasties, which is crazy because dynasties just don't happen for dynasties. That just doesn't happen. So when you hear me say I've lived through 4 dynasties, 2 in New England Patriots, 5, 2 New England Patriot dynasties, the Golden State Warriors dynasty. Nobody talks about this one, but the Oklahoma softball dynasty, and now this Kansas City Chiefs one. So when you hear you've lived through quote unquote 4 or 5 dynasties, people think that that's a regularity. People think that that is something that you just happen. It just happens, and it doesn't. Because outside of those, you have the UCLA way back in the 60s and 70s. You have, the Steelers back in the day, Cowboys back in the day, the Celtics with the Bill Russell era, the Lakers with the Shaq and Kobe era. You have the New York Yankees. You have the Red Sox. But that's about it. Mind you, there is multiple years and multiple teams that have never seen a dynasty. So when we talk about it, people talk about this like it's regular, like it's normal. It's not at all. And I think that is important to understand. That what we're seeing is rare. And as I'm sitting here today, of course, they have to figure out what's going to happen with Snead, what's going to happen with Chris Jones. I don't think Chris Jones is going to come back because you had a chance to pay him before and you didn't. So I don't know why you pay him now. So I think Chris Jones might be out of here. And that could affect a lot of things. But as I'm sitting here today, it's very hard for me to pick anyone else outside of Kansas City Chiefs to be the first team since Tom Brady's dynasty Patriots and go back to back, win 3 straight. Because you still have that guy in Patrick Mahomes. So congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs for beating the 49ers 25-22 in the Super Bowl. Before we get off the Super Bowl, I want to talk about something. I want to talk about reactions. You can kind of throw expectations out the window because both teams expect to win. Now, obviously, there are some teams that are better than others in the Super Bowl that make it to the Super Bowl. But when you get to the Super Bowl, the only expectation out of both franchises is to win. But it's very fascinating to see how both teams react after the fact. Obviously, you have one team that's elated. You have one team that is a champion, one team that is jumping for joy, one team that is obviously at the peak, at the mountaintop, and victorious there, so they're happy. They're getting ready for the parade. Oh, speaking of parade, I want to send my condolences to everyone that was affected in the shooting at the Kansas City Chiefs parade. I know one person lost their life from what's being reported now. Rest in peace to them. I pray for I pray for strength for everyone that has to deal with that. Obviously, that is tough, man. That is supposed to be a day of joy, of bliss, of elation, and it turns to horror quickly. And you have kids there, you have you have people there that obviously didn't expect to be in a shootout. You know what I mean? So I pray for everyone that was affected. I pray for everyone that was wounded, and I pray for the family of the person that lost their life. It's unfortunate. So I pray for you guys, and I'm sorry to hear about the people that were affected by the shooting at in the Kansas City parade. But getting back to what I was saying, I'm talking about reactions, and I'm talking about the reaction not just of the winning team, but of the losing team. Steve Wilks, who was now the defensive coordinator for the 49ers, was quickly fired after the game. Probably 2 or 3 days after the Super Bowl, he was fired. And it looks like that he, for lack of a better term, was the scapegoat, or was the person that they were going to put the blame on for not essentially winning the Super Bowl. We talk about decisions, and we talk about the margin of error, and some of the decisions, some of the times when you needed a defensive stop, you were unable to get it. I'm not going to put that on the 49ers. I'm putting that on the greatness of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. But let's elaborate a little bit. I think Steve Wilks, this is gonna sound crazy for me to say that. I'm not going to say this. What I'm going to say is Steve Wilks. I hate talking about Steve Wilks, because Steve Wilks is the only coach multiple times that I can think of that did not deserve to be fired. Multiple times. Whether you're talking about the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, whether you're talking about the interim head coach of the Carolina Panthers, whether we're talking about the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. Steve Wilks, when we talk about him, he does everything right. Everything right. And still continues to get the raw end of the stick. I'm looking at Kyle Shanahan. There is no doubt in my mind that Kyle Shanahan is one of the best coaches in football. No doubt. There is no doubt in my mind that the 49ers are a better team because Kyle Shanahan is the coach of that team. No doubt in my mind. But as we've seen in sports, great players, great coaches, great people can make mistakes. And whether we talk about some of the offensive plays, some of the decision making, the play calls, whether we talk about the overtime situation where you elect to get the ball first and let Patrick Mahomes end the game on you, or we talk about the 3-4 play, I believe, which would have been an easy touchdown in the overtime, and you leave Chris Jones, their best defender, unblocked with a straight line to your quarterback, which made the throw rushed and didn't get the touchdown. You settle for 3. That's not a defensive thing. Kyle Shanahan has been to what? 4 or 5, either NFC championships or Super Bowls. And every single time he's come up short. Again, I'm not taking away from Kyle Shanahan. I think Kyle Shanahan is one of the best coaches in football. But I do want to highlight the fact of, even with that, Kyle Shanahan, who has had the better team in a lot of those NFC or Super Bowl matchups, has lost. Yet and still, you want to, I'm not saying he did, but it looks like these are the optics. You want to blame Steve Wilks or put the onus on Steve Wilks. They held the great Patrick Mahomes to 19 second half points. That's great in the Super Bowl. Steve Wilks didn't make the decision to receive the ball in overtime. Steve Wilks isn't the reason why George Kittle had 2 receptions for 4 yards. Steve Wilks isn't the reason that Deebo Samuels has 3 receptions for 33 yards. That's not on Steve Wilks. And again, it's unfortunate that every single time I talk about Steve Wilks in this instance, he always receives something, or he didn't deserve to be fired. He shouldn't have been. They said that the defense wasn't clicking as far as the front end of the defense and the back end of the defense wasn't connected. Well, didn't you lose key players on both sides, like on both the front and the backs of the defense this entire year, which could have been a reason why things were not as staunch as it was in the beginning of the year? Or the fact that you bring in a whole force on the defense and Chase Young that has to integrate himself into an entirely different organization, entirely different scheme. Or the fact that you lost Dre Greenlaw, one of your best defenders in the Super Bowl, running onto the field, torn ACL. It's unfortunate, man. People that want to blame Steve Wilks. Steve Wilks did a hell of a job as the 49ers defensive coordinator. Unfortunately, it's all about reactions, and somebody has to take the blame. And as unfair that I think it was him. Instead of the fact of you taking on and the fact that you sputtered on offense and you made some very poor offensive decisions. And you're playing an all-time player. So, but shouts out to the Kansas City Chiefs for beating the 49ers 25-22. That Usher performance was pretty good too. I will say that. Let's move forward. When you watch Patrick Mahomes, you know that you're watching something that you've never seen before. You know that you're watching a once-in-a-generational player. Quiet as is kept, that's the same feeling you get to a lesser extent, because obviously to me he's not better than him, but that's the same feeling that I get sometimes when I watch Lamar Jackson. I've never seen a player like Lamar Jackson. Same thing, same type of feeling you have when you watch someone like Aaron Donald. It's not just football. Me watching LeBron James, I've never seen a player like LeBron James. Same way I feel watching someone like Steph Curry. I've never seen a player like Steph Curry. These are once-in-a-generation type players. When we watch them, when we see them, we need to respect what we're seeing. And we need to marvel at what we're seeing, because the phrase once in a generation is exactly that. You're not going to get this again for a while. You may have players that are close. You may have players that are extremely talented, but once in a generation is a once in a generation. And the reason why I put Lamar Jackson in that class is because we've never seen a mobile player play like Lamar Jackson. We've never seen a player as great, in my opinion, as Patrick Mahomes. Hell, we've never seen a team and a player like Tom Brady and the Patriots. What am I getting to? Caitlin Clark is one of those players. Caitlin Clark is one of those once-in-a-generation players. And we have to respect what we're seeing out of her and what we're seeing from, or what the future could hold with Caitlin Clark. So Caitlin Clark sets the NCAA scoring record, overtaking Kelsey Plum. Caitlin Clark now sits with the record with 3,569 points. Completely clearing Kelsey Plum, who was 3,527. She needed 8 points going into the game. Going into the game 2 or 3 days ago against Michigan. She needed 8 points. Not only did she score the first 8 points of the game, she finished the game with, I think, 49 points. Completely shattering the record. And she still has games to go. Caitlin Clark is the most popular thing in women's sports right now. That is on top of Simone Biles. That's on top of Sha'Carri Richardson, Angel Reese, Asia Wilson. And I'm not saying she's better. I'm talking about popularity. I was watching the Gilbert Arenas podcast, or Gil's Arena, and they were talking about Michael Porter Jr.'s comments about women's basketball and the pay gap. I'm not going to go into exactly what they said. Go check that out. And I'm also not going to talk about the pay gap right now. But what I'm going to talk about is one of the things that Gilbert Arenas and I believe Lexi Brown and Rashad McCann, what they said was the WNBA has a connectability issue at times because you see a lot of players that are older. Because it's so challenging to make it and to stay in the WNBA because there's so little roster spots. that a lot of great young players that may have been incredible in college that ultimately doesn't have the space or room in the WNBA, they fall to the wayside. And while the WNBA is increasing year after year in popularity, it still misses that connection. It still misses that mark at times. Because while, yes, you have an A'ja Wilson, there's not many players in the WNBA that a lot of younger girls connect to, which ultimately hurts the way that you can promote the league, which hurts the way that you grow the league, which hurts the way that, just the way that the league operates. And you're seeing these women, these women in college, whether that's Caitlin Clark, whether that's Juju Watkins, whether that's Angel Reese, Deasia Fair from Syracuse, Syracuse. These women are bigger names than most WNBA, if not all the WNBA. And I'm not saying I get it because of the roster spots and the lack of availability in a lot of areas, why there is a rule that they have to stay in the league for, I think, 3 years. But what I'm saying is they're growing all this buzz in college. The WNBA needs to find a way to continue that buzz when they get there. And what we've seen is they've had a very tough time. Remember how popular, and this is no offense to her at all, so this is no offense to any players, but remember how popular Aaliyah Boston was in college, and how that popularity is nowhere close to where it is now with I believe the Indiana Fever. The only person that right now has exceeded their popularity or matched their popularity from college to the WNBA is A'ja Wilson right now. And that just so happens to be the best player in the WNBA and on a team that just won back-to-back championships. Caitlin Clark is a once-in-a-generation talent. And this batch of players, and obviously they all aren't going to be able to be drafted at the same time because I think, they got freshmen or whatever, but this batch of college players, whether that's, like I said, Caitlin Clark, whether that's Angel Reese, whether that's Juju Watkins, whether that's Paige Beckers, this batch, you have to find a way to tap into their popularity now, moving forward. Because I don't know if they can't. I don't know if they just haven't figured out a way how. But that is what's going to take the WNBA over the top. Now, don't get me wrong. There is some incredible basketball being played in the WNBA. I'm not here disrespecting the players. I'm not here saying that the players are trash. I'm not saying that. I'm not here saying it's bad basketball. It's not. But what the WNBA has, and the issues I'll say that it has, is a marketing issue. I've talked about this ad nauseum. The WNBA should be way bigger than it is, but it has a marketing issue. And the marketing issue isn't just, Instagram post, isn't commercials. No, the marketing issue is they have maybe because the players have to stay so long in college. that when they build this cachet, this fandom in college, and it, for lack of a better term, goes by the wayside in the WNBA. Because a lot of the remember Alexis Morris? I'm not saying she was the greatest WNBA or college player, but she was a popular college player. Last time I checked, she's with the Harlem Globetrotters right now. And that's no offense to her, but what I'm saying is, how are you not able to maximize the popularity of Alexis Morris? Now, I understand there were some personal things that she said about the league and about stuff like that, but still, it's incredibly difficult. This is a new age in sports. This is a new age in life. Social media is bigger than ever, is more important to growth than ever. And the WNBA needs to find a way to maximize that. And that's the way that they'll grow. That's the way that they'll reach another level. But congratulations to Caitlin Clark for breaking the NCAA women's all-time scoring record. That was once held by the Vegas Aces' very own Kelsey Plum. Again, about Caitlin, she is a once-in-a-generational player. I've seen a lot of jokes about, she's doing this in the WNCAA. Why don't you take it to the men's side? She couldn't do this in the NBA. These are from the same people that couldn't even make their high school team. Congratulations to Caitlin Clark for breaking the record and shattering the record, because, again, she still has games to go. So, what's so fascinating? I want to talk about Klay Thompson for a second. What's so fascinating about Klay Thompson is we're seeing something that is incredibly rare from Klay Thompson. We're seeing a star try to figure out in real time how to deal with his sports mortality. That's life, things. The older you get, the more tread that you put in your body, the further and further away that you get from your apex. The further and further away you get from your magnum opus, I guess. And for some players, you don't really have to see them deal with it because they retire, or they were never that great to begin with, so the fall wasn't as steep. Some players, you don't get to see it. Injuries they go from injured or great injured and they're just gone. But what you're seeing out of Klay Thompson is a person that is fighting it. And there are some nights when it seems that Klay Thompson is accepting it. Then there's some nights that he's not accepting it at all. Actually, let me say, most nights he's not accepting it at all. We talk about importance to teams, and we talk about dynasties. We talked about dynasty when we were talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. Klay Thompson is a major factor and a major reason why Golden State not only has 4 banners hanging up from 2015 to 2022 or to now, but he's one of the main reasons why the Golden State Warriors is valued at what they are, and they're one of the most marketable franchises in sports right now. when we talk about the great, when we give out credit, we always talk about Steph Curry, and rightfully so. And we always describe Steph Curry as the greatest shooter that God's ever created, greatest shooter ever, which is true. A lot of people want to accredit the dynasty to Kevin Durant, which I have no problem in. Kevin Durant obviously was a game changer. He is a top 10 or 15 to 10, whatever you want to call him, player of all time. Obviously, he was incredibly important in their success. But the thing about Klay Thompson is he has done things that neither Kevin Durant or Steph Curry has done. And I don't think they could do. I think Klay Thompson, in my opinion, you can argue if you would like, it's fine. But in my opinion, Klay Thompson is the second greatest shooter that the world has ever seen. And he's done things like 30. He has the most points in a quarter with 37. He has 60 points on like 11 dribbles. I'll say that again. 60 points on 11 dribbles. We talk about Game 6 Klay a lot and how a lot of the championships rested on him having to save the day, even with Kevin Durant, even with Steph Curry and Draymond Green. But what we're seeing now, this Klay is far from that Klay. And a lot of it is because of the injuries. He had 2 lower leg injuries that were season ending back to back. And while people want to say, well, he won the championships in 2022. Yeah, but you also realize that season was a struggle. He just caught fire at the right time. But even in the finals, he wasn't that good in the playoffs, actually. And we're seeing now Klay Thompson struggle with accepting that. We hear clips about it and whatever, but he's struggling. Now, Klay Thompson got benched. And that's kind of what I want to talk about right now. He got benched, and the first game he got benched, he dropped 35 points, season high. He looked like the Klay of old. I want to focus on that for a second because that is Klay getting benched is major for the Golden State Warriors in a couple ways, and could do wonders for the Golden State, and also could hinder the Golden State Warriors. It's no question that Golden State has struggled this year. I mean, they're 26-26 going into the All-Star break. With this roster, they should be much better than that. So we don't need to. We've talked about it ad nauseum on this podcast multiple times. But I'll focus on Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson is having one of his worst seasons as a professional in his career, in his NBA life. He's averaging 17 points a game, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, shooting 42% from the field. That is some of the worst numbers he's had since his rookie year. And I said going into the season that the Golden State Warriors championship, their championship hopes rest on 2 players' shoulders: Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins has been that we're not even going to talk about how he's done the first half of the season, but Klay Thompson has been vital for the Golden State Warriors, both success and not unsuccess this season. When he's been bad, he's been bad. Klay Thompson has tried to force things a lot, and he has been god-awful in the fourth quarter a lot of times this season. I mean, we can talk about the blunder against, who was it? The Clippers. but he's been bad. So when he gets benched and they play the Utah Jazz and again he has 35, that can be a blessing for Klay Thompson. Because there is a difference, whether you want to admit it or not. Everyone's an NBA player that's in the NBA, obviously, but there is a difference between playing with a first unit and playing with the second unit. Because the second unit, you're not playing with, if you're on the second unit, more than likely you're not good enough to be on the first unit, or the first unit is better. So you get to Klay Thompson, as much as he's struggled, he's still a first unit player. So you're playing against it. It's kind of like when you see, for a lesser extent, obviously, when you see stars go to the G League, whether they come back from injury or they're struggling, they go to the G League, and then you look and they got like 58 points or something, and again, it's like, oh yeah, all right, okay. To a much better extent, because people in the NBA aren't G League. You're not playing against the same type of talent when you're playing against the second teams. So Klay Thompson, who's been struggling with his confidence, who's been struggling with his shot this year, he's able to play a little freer because he knows that he's supposed to be better than the second teams. So he plays a little freer. He's able to get his mind right. He's able to focus on just what he has to focus on, and you see the game that he has. But another thing that I want to focus on, and when I said it can be a blessing or a curse, here's where the curse can come in. Steph Curry struggled. Steph Curry struggled against the Utah Jazz. Let me go to the box score for a second. Now, you can say that it was a back-to-back, which it was, but Steph Curry went 4 for 14, 2 for 8 from 3. He missed 2 free throws. He had 16 points. This is also coming off the night before he had like 40 or something against the Clippers. Now, is it Brandon? Bobby? Yeah, Brandon. I said Bobby. Brandon Podziemski has been great. Don't get me wrong. And quiet as it's kept, Brandon Podziemski has played better than Klay Thompson this year. But here's where I said that Klay Thompson coming off the bench can be a curse for Golden State. I'm not the only person that thinks that, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are arguably the greatest shooters we've ever seen. A lot of NBA teams think this. And whether Klay Thompson is having a bad season or not, that's still Klay Thompson. And you game plan differently going against someone like Klay Thompson. The spacing is different, especially in the backcourt. Well, and Podziemski has been great, but Podziemski's name doesn't hold the same weight, doesn't hold the same cachet as Klay Thompson. So defenses guard Steph Curry and guard the Golden State Warriors differently with Klay Thompson on the court and without him. So the defensive focus can be more on Steph Curry with Podziemski in the game, because people, while he can shoot, people aren't looking at his shot the same way they're looking at Klay Thompson's shot. So you can focus more on Steph Curry and contain him. Because I'm almost sure if you go into the game and say, if after the game, Brandon Podziemski had 40 points, you'd be like, damn, all right, well, nothing we can do. But if you go in there and say Steph Curry had 40 points and Brandon Podziemski had 13 and Jonathan Kuminga had 13 and Klay Thompson had 35, I was like, all right, obviously the scouting report wasn't. We didn't adhere to the scouting report. So what I'm saying is, yes, I think going to the bench is massive for Klay Thompson. I think that it'll help him in the long run. I still don't think I'm sorry, they're 27 and 26 right now. I still don't think Golden State is a championship team right now because they their biggest issue is height, and they continue to get killed on the glass, and they have a tough time finishing games. I think that they've lost like six or seven games after being up 15 or more points, including the Clippers game that we talked about. Yeah. But Klay Thompson, it is very fascinating, and sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's not, watching Klay Thompson deal with his basketball mortality. Because a lot of times, once a player gets to that point, they just retire. Like, we don't really get to see it in real time. So, especially a player at the heights that Klay Thompson was. Don't get me wrong, I know Klay Thompson isn't the face, or was never the face of Golden State, but Klay Thompson is a first ballot Hall of Famer. That should tell you all you need to know. As a second or third option, whatever you want to call them. So, yeah. Let's move forward. I talk about when we talk about fit, and when we say fit matters, a lot of the time we talk about players. And it's not just with players, but when I say fit matters, a lot of the time I do talk about players, and players is what comes up in that sense. Coaches fit that description too, and should fit that description more, actually. When you're, as an owner, as a GM, when you're deciding who is going to be the coach of your team, I think it's very important not just to see the history of the wins and losses, but to see the history of the type of players they've coached. And does your team fit the same type of players that they're used to coaching? That, especially in basketball, is extremely important, in my opinion, on if a coach should or should not be hired. The Milwaukee Bucks are 3-7 right now under the new Doc Rivers regime. And they're on a 2-game losing streak currently. Now, yes, we are on All-Star break, All-Star weekend, but going into All-Star weekend, they are on a 2-game losing streak. You can feel how you feel about Doc Rivers. I don't think Doc Rivers is the greatest coach, because I know a lot of people say, well, he's won a considerable amount everywhere he's went. I say, yeah, but he only has one championship, and he's played with some incredible names like T-Mac, like Chris Paul, like Blake Griffin, like Joel Embiid, like James Harden, and only has one championship in 2008 with the first quote-unquote super team, and with Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett. But what I want to focus on is, you want to know why I don't think the Milwaukee, I think now more than ever shows why. I'm not going to say that they're going to lose a lot. I'm not going to say that they're now just going to continue to just lose every game, or go 3-7 spans. But one reason why I think that they're not going to reach their pinnacle, or they're not going to reach the goals that they want with Doc Rivers, is because of Damian Lillard. And I'm not blaming Damian Lillard at all. In fact, I'm blaming Doc Rivers, because look at the track record that Doc Rivers has with point guards. The one time he's seen success, the one time he's gotten to the mountaintop, the point guard that he had was Rajon Rondo. And if you look at the history of Doc Rivers, he has struggled with, I'm not going to say struggled. He has struggled to he has struggled to reach the potential of scoring point guards. Because Doc Rivers' system is not predicated to a scoring point guard. His offenses are usually predicated to a pass first point guard, i.e. Rajon Rondo, i.e. Chris Paul. And you see he struggled with James Harden and Tyrese Maxey to score first point guards or guards. You can say how you feel about Adrian Griffin, if he should or shouldn't have been fired. But what I will say is, I don't think you can talk about his lack of adjustments, which is a thing with Doc Rivers. You can talk about his epic playoff collapses, which are a thing with Doc Rivers. But I won't talk about any of that because I have talked about it. But what I will talk, what I'm highlighting is the fact of you bring in Damian Lillard, who is in every way, shape, and form a score-first player, a score-first point guard. And now you have a coach that has never, I repeat, never found success with a point guard that was score first. And you wonder why they're struggling. The Milwaukee Bucks are going to win a lot of games. When you have Damian Lillard and you have Giannis, that's just going to happen. That should be far, far beyond the best duo in the NBA. But the reason why it will never be under Doc Rivers is because Doc Rivers has a track record of struggling to coach those type of players. So, good luck. Let's move forward. Oh boy. Washington. Let's go to football for a second. And I want to highlight how important this draft is for the Washington Commanders. I talked about it a little bit last episode or maybe 2 episodes ago of how important today's decisions are because it drastically affects the future. And I don't know if you've been keeping up, but the Washington Commanders have made a lot of movement, whether we talk about Dan Quinn being the head coach or Cliff Kingsbury being the offensive coordinator or Anthony Lynn joining the coaching staff. There's been a lot of moves. None of that matters if you don't get the right quarterback. None of it. Now, you can say that they brought in Cliff Kingsbury because of his relationship with Caleb Williams. And I would say, well, that's cool, but you still have the 2nd overall pick, not the 1st. It is vital that they nail the draft. Whether you trade up to get Caleb Williams, or you can even trade up to or find a way to get Justin Fields, I don't know. But this draft, I think there is not a franchise or an organization in the NFL where this draft is more important for. Because of the new regime, and this is the foundation. This draft. I'm not saying that the quarterback of the future. Yes, I am. The quarterback of the future has to be now. You have to hit. You have to hit. It could be Caleb Williams. It could be Jalen Daniels. It could be Michael Penix. It could be Justin Fields. It can be Bone. It has Drake May. Look, you have to hit. Because all these moves, which are huge moves, but all these moves would be for nothing. And you'd be right back at square one. In fact, you'd probably be farther than square one because you had a running head start. So I think Caleb Williams, you have to do whatever it takes to get him, whether that's trade the second pick and give him Jonathan. I don't know, but you have to get Caleb Williams or a franchise quarterback. Got to do it. Got to. This is vital. And lastly, before we go, the unpopular topic of the day. Let's talk about football. Let's talk about soccer for a second and how soccer finds themselves with a little problem. So, Kylian Mbappe is by far the best young player in soccer, football, whatever you want to call it. You still have the megastars, like you still have Lionel Messi, and you still have Cristiano Ronaldo. And I think that their stature, kind of like LeBron James, is always going to be up there until they leave. But probably the third player or the first best young player is Kylian Mbappe. And Kylian Mbappe has been on PSG for, I think, his entire career. Now, he's played alongside Neymar. He's played alongside Lionel Messi. But Mbappe has not been happy with PSG and is about to be out of there and wants to play for Real Madrid. You're seeing this issue happen, maybe not a lot, but you're seeing it. You saw it with Neymar, and now you're seeing it with Mbappe, and that is you're seeing younger players try to force their way places. And if a club is willing to pay the transfer fee, willing to pay the fines, then they'll do it. But I think that this is going to hurt contracts moving forward because it's like, yeah, like how can I pay you $500 million and you're about to dip? Now, this Mbappe situation is a little different because he has been told PSG, which is obviously Paris Saint-Germain. He's been told them they want to leave, and they have tried their darndest not to let him go. So I'm very interested to see how this turns out. Now I know that he's probably going to finish the end of the season with the club, but or end of the summer with the club, but I'm interested to see if this whole player movement thing, what it looks like going down to the soccer or football sector, not down, going to it, So I'm interested to see because PSG, bro, they have to be studied, man. Because PSG, do you know how many great players went for PSG? Now they've won, obviously, but I don't know. I don't remember a PSG player at the magnitude of obviously Mbappe that has left PSG on good terms. I don't think Neymar left on good terms. I know Lionel Messi didn't leave on good terms. And it's looking like Mbappe is not about to leave on good terms. So while they maximize what they have when they have them and win, Paris Saint-Germain, man, they have a tough time retaining players. But we'll see. So And there you have it, man. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, the link is in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, man. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. Again, I was just on break and now I'm back. So, the frequency of clips and reels and episodes, I'm back. So I drop pretty much content every day. Tell a friend to subscribe. Also, if you listen to the DSPs, whether that's Apple Podcasts, whether that's Spotify, whether that's SoundCloud, please subscribe there. Please follow there. You guys are very important as well, and I take you guys' love and follow very seriously. So tell a friend to follow or subscribe. Also, subscribe to the socials, Instagram, TikTok. I post daily. Again, I did take probably a week break, but I'm back. So getting back to posting daily. I post reels, I post stories, I post clips daily. Please subscribe. That's probably the quickest way to get to me. If you have a question, if you want to debate something, leave it in the comments. And until next time, much love.